Hey, what's up, guys? This is Colin Reese. I wanted to talk about why so many U.S. men's national team fans are so clueless and ignorant about soccer. I think a lot of these people don't actually watch soccer. If you interact online on like Twitter or anywhere with U.S. men's national team fans, the majority that you come across online are quote unquote Eurosnobs. But the interesting thing about this is normally a Eurosnob is someone that watches like La Liga, Serie A, the Bundesliga, the Premier League, and Ligue 1, and doesn't watch any MLS. But the majority of these guys that are really anti MLS in the sense that they don't want any MLS player on the U.S. men's national team roster, most of these type of Euro snobs don't actually watch any European soccer. If you look at their tweets and what they say online, you'll see that their only real interest is when an American is playing for some European club. And frequently, I don't even think they actually watch these games. And what they do is they just see if an American happened to play for whatever European club team he's on, and they'll tweet out like if he started or when he came off the bench. And frequently they just watch highlights or they don't even watch the games. And if they do watch the game, that's kind of the extent of their involvement with European soccer. And you can tell by the opinions that they share online that they really don't watch European soccer closely. A while back, I did some kind of joke polls on Twitter to see what people would answer, and there were like I did one where I asked who was better, Lucas Paquetá or Luca de la Torre, and people voted for Luca de la Torre over Lucas Paquetá. And then I did others like that. I was trying to select players who were really good, but weren't like famous enough that people would instantly vote for them over an American. So I didn't do any like who's better, Karim Benzema or Jordan Pefok. I tried to do ones where you had to have like a lot more soccer knowledge, and they frequently pick the wrong one. And I did several of these, and you could tell that just most of the people that were answering it, like they weren't joking, they were serious. And there were a lot of comments below where people that really actually did watch European soccer thought it was funny that people picked those guys, and they thought it was embarrassing for American soccer fans that they were picking like these kind of mediocre, average American players over players that were just a lot better than them. The Lucas Paquetá one was one of the funniest ones because Lucas Paquetá started like the last 9 games or so for Brazil as the playmaker, and Luca de la Torre is a good player, but he's playing for Heracles in the Eredivisie, and at one point they were in like 13th place, which isn't that, that's not that big of a deal, but Lucas Paquetá is a world-class attacking midfielder, and there was really no comparison. But I think, like I said earlier, a lot of these U.S. men's national team fans that like to bully everyone around and mock any MLS players, they're not actual soccer experts or people that watch soccer that closely, so their opinions don't really matter very much. And from what I can tell, their analysis of the U.S. men's national team consists of if they think the U.S. isn't playing that well, then they think one of the random kind of mediocre U.S. players playing in Europe should be plugged into the 4-3-3 somewhere. So, like they'll say Luca de la Torre should be plugged in for Sebastian Lletget in the three-man midfield, but there's never any comment about how the midfield didn't provide any final balls for Pepe, and they think you can just plug in a different player. But the problem with this lack of final balls to Pepe or whoever was the U.S. wasn't using a 10 or a playmaker in front of the midfield three. And the way the U.S. uses the midfield three is it's a defensive midfielder behind two number 8s or box-to-box midfielders. But Berhalter thinks of these guys as attacking midfielders when they're really not. And they're frequently just too far away from the goal. And there's too many opposing players in front of them for them to be able to play any kind of final balls. I talked about this before. A lot of the CONCACAF teams bunker, and they park the bus, so they'll have the 4 midfielders and the 4 defenders sitting back. So there's not really any space to play any final balls through. And who's ever in the midfield 3, they're usually pretty far from goal. And when like Musa and McKinney have been effective at going forward or playing passes into the attack, they're always played out wide, which is usually like the only open pass. So they hit a diagonal pass to one of the wings or the fullbacks, and usually those guys are somewhat pinned to the sideline, but sometimes there's an opening for a cross. So my point in saying all of this is that these fans that are really quick to mock the U.S. players that play in MLS, they don't see the real problem, which is the Berhalter's tactics and the formation and how there's not a link with the attack. And if you look at their tweets and stuff online, you can see that they're not following like the Serie A games or the La Liga games. And it's usually a focus on the Premier League and the Bundesliga, but the only focus is really just if an American played there. So it's funny that they mock MLS players because they're not actually experts at European soccer, even though they think they are, and they don't watch it. And the problem with this is there's still a big stigma against American players. So it's still really hard for American players to play in Europe, especially if you're more of an attacking player. And there's a lot of elements that prevent American players from going to Europe. Obviously, any of these guys in MLS, if they got an offer to play for some decent European team, they would jump on the opportunity. But there's problems with the visa, whether their club is willing to sell them, and whether they want too much money. So it's not just a matter of ability. There's a lot of factors that come into play. And I think a lot of these fans that aren't really soccer fans, they think if you're in MLS, it's because you totally suck and you should have taken a chance and tried to go to Europe. But a lot of these people didn't really have the chance, or there was something that was stopping them from going, like their club wouldn't sell them, or there was an issue with the visa. So these kind of Eurosnobs have this really narrow understanding of not only just soccer in general, but who can go to Europe. And so what this causes is when they watch an MLS player, they can't evaluate the MLS player and say oh wow, this guy's definitely good enough to be playing in Europe, but he's not playing there now, but still you can tell that his level is above MLS and he looks like he should be a national team player. They usually don't do this. They just think, oh, if you're in MLS, you suck. And if you're on the national team, you're just going to bring down the level of the national team because we need all players playing in Europe. And if you were any good, you'd be playing in Europe. And, that's not true. And I think if these people actually watched more elite soccer, then they would be able to pick out which MLS players were kind of too good to be playing in MLS and that should be national team players. but they don't have that ability, so they just see anyone that plays in MLS and they think that they suck, and then therefore it's open season to ridicule them. And if they're ever on the national team or trying out for the national team, that they just deserve to be mocked and ridiculed. And people that actually know a lot more about soccer know that not everyone in MLS is a low-level player, and a lot of them are good enough to be playing in a better league, and a lot of them maybe there's something stopping them from going, whether it's, like I said, the club asking for too much money or some issue with the work visa in Europe. So I think a lot of these quote-unquote Eurosnobs aren't actually real Eurosnobs. They're just people that know so little about soccer that they just think any MLS player is a joke and shouldn't be anywhere near the national team. But like I said, if you look at their online activity, you'll see that they don't follow European soccer and don't seem to know any of the players that well, and their interest in soccer just seems to be, whether an American played or not. So they're almost this kind of like flag-waving nativist, in the sense that they just care about whether Americans are playing, and they don't really enjoy watching soccer in general. So yeah, that's my opinion of those guys, and I think they need to be less rude and obnoxious on social media, and that they're pretty much cyberbullies that unjustly rag on a lot of MLS players that are pretty good. So thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next time.